Year-end is coming, and with it, the rush to close the books and report results. For most finance teams, this means building the income statement, the one report that really sums up the entire year's performance. In this video, I'll show you how to build a fully automated profit and loss statement in Power BI using Zebra BI visuals. We'll cover how to create a clean data model, calculate KPIs, analyze trends, and make your report clear, accurate, and understandable without complex docs or manual formatting. And if you'd like to follow along, start the free trial of Zebra BI at zebrabi.com/trial. Every good financial statement starts with good structure. This is an example of a hierarchical income statement that shows this structure particularly well. We can expand or collapse our account structure to understand better what represents our revenue or our costs of goods sold, or of course any other group. Here we have a two-tier hierarchy, but you can make them as detailed as need be for your business. We have seen them go as deep as 7 tiers, but the ideas shown in this video will work just as well on any of them. The structure is particularly well represented with the added calculation waterfall visualization that is included in the Zebra BI visualizations. This part makes the income statement understandable even to non-finance individuals, as it shows the financial flow and logic of the P&L calculations. Next important part is the variances. They're clearly showing us where we're doing better and where we are worse, and they're one of the most important aspects of making your reports actionable. If you want to learn more about this, you can check out a video that we just made about variance analysis, and it's going to be linked in the description below. Last, but just as important, are the comments. Visually connected directly to specific data points, they allow us to give context to numbers and really understand the why behind them. All of this in a responsive and dynamic environment like Power BI allows you to explore your monthly results, your year-to-date results with just a single click, or even create the holy trinity of financial results like the balance sheet or the cash flow statement, all in the same visualization. And all of this starts in the data model, where if we look a little bit closer at our accounts table, we can see that in the accounts table, every account has its hierarchy. In category class, we have our calculation logic with a result flag that tells Zebra BI how to calculate and format every account, and the column for report type to know what accounts build each report. This is how the visual knows that cost should appear inverted, or that subtotals like gross profit and EBIT should be calculated and not aggregated, and also what accounts to include in certain report types. And if your model follows this kind of structure, your reports are practically going to build themselves. Now, let me show you how to do this. Here is how our model looks. We have imported all of our data from Excel, but you would probably connect it to your own data source. The important thing here is to try to structure it as a star schema data model. This means that we have our fact table in the middle, this is our financials, and all around it different dimension tables like our calendar, our business unit, and our accounts that are connected to it. First, let's take a closer look at our fact table, starting with the financials. In the financials table, we have all of our values for our actual, our forecast, and our plan. We also have the ID columns with which we connect to our dimensions. However, I wanted to show you this especially because we already have some measures created, and just so you can see that very simple docs is needed to create the measures that we are going to use in our visualizations later. So you can see that for our actual measure, we simply use calculate to filter the data by our scenario column. Now we do have another fact table in our model, and it's our comments table. With the comments table, again, it's structured pretty similarly to our financials table, but it doesn't hold the values, it actually holds the comments. It's connected to all of our dimensions so that we can put specific comments. Maybe I can show you this on the report. Specific comments, let's say this one, directly to an account, so service or other revenue, April, month of April, and year of 2025. This way, when we change the month, we can get dynamic comments that, of course, differ for each period, because, of course, every period would have their own why of why something has happened. We do have another way of adding our comments to our visualization with the addition of the annotation layer in Zebra BI, but I'll show you this a little bit later. Going back to our data model view, you can see that around our fact table are some connected dimensions, building the star schema, and some disconnected tables that are here to help us with some calculations. Now, focusing on our dimensions, let's take a little bit of a deeper dive in our accounts table, where the category class column is the one that is probably most important. I mentioned it in the beginning already, and this one is going to help us automatically create our financial statements, as this column holds the logic of how accounts should be accounted in our calculation, which means that Zebra BI can format results, invert costs just by this column. Now I think we are ready to build the P&L statement. So now that we have our data model configured, the next thing we have to do before we can start building is get the Zebra BI visualizations. We can do this by opening the three dots here and choosing Get More Visuals. This will open Microsoft App Source. You can see Zebra BI tables right here, so you can simply download them here. Otherwise, go to search and just search Zebra. There we go. You'll get all of our visualizations, our App Source visuals. Here we go, the tables, the charts, and the cards. When you've done this and added your visualizations to your visualization pane, we can start building. Also, if you like the information of this video and find it interesting, consider liking the video and subscribing to our YouTube channel. Also, hit the bell icon to always be notified of future uploads and never miss a chance to learn something new about reporting. Let's start by adding our Zebra BI tables, making the visualization a little bit larger as we have some room, some space. Okay, and now we can start populating the fields. Zebra BI has some field placeholders to know how to format and function with different measures. So we're going to simply start and we're going to put our actual values under values. Then under our category, we're going to put our accounts, and above them, our account groups. There. We just made our hierarchy. The next thing is we're going to disable sorting by ascending and go to a custom sort that we already have prepared in our accounts table. Now we're going to click on the drop down arrow, and here from our chart type, you can see we can choose different charts. A pin chart, a waterfall chart, or what we really need, a calculation waterfall chart. Now we can go in and we can start building the logic behind our visualization. So revenues are of course positive, so they go to the right. COGS, or cost of goods sold, make a negative impact toward our bottom line and should be inverted. With a right click, we simply invert this field, and there we go. The calculation already makes sense, right? We made 23.8 million of revenue, and from this, we have to subtract 8.7 million of costs. Then gross profit is the result of exactly these two accounts. So with gross profit, again, right click on gross profit and simply mark it as result. There we go. We can build this logic manually now with all the other accounts, but if you remember, we were talking before about our category class measure. So if we scroll down, there is a placeholder for this category class. And what we can do is we can go to our accounts table, take our category class column, and simply drop it in, building our P&L statement with just a single drag and drop. And if you remember, this logic, COGS being a negative impact on our bottom line, gross profit being a result, all of these we had in our accounts table. Now we already have a very good looking P&L statement, but now it's time to make it actionable. So what we're going to do is we're going to go and we're going to add our plan values to our plan placeholder. And just like that, with a single drag and drop, Zebra BI was able to understand what plan is, what actuals are, and calculated variances between them all by itself. I didn't have to make any new calculations, any new measures, or use any docs for this. We can go in and we can make this view a little bit different if we want, and let's say maybe hide the plan numbers, because we already have this absolute and relative variances towards plan, so we understand how to interpret this pretty well. So now that we have our variances, we can see that we are below plan. So a good thing to do now is to open up our hierarchies to maybe get a little bit of a better understanding of what's going on. And just by opening this up, we can see that our costs are not the biggest impact on why our even gross profit is lower than it was planned. Our service and other revenue are also lacking behind plan. All of this then contributed to us having a lower net income than was planned. After seeing this, I think that we could benefit from some extra calculations. And we can add the non-visual calculation straight to the Zebra BI visualization. We're going to go here to gross profit, right click, and we're going to add a formula. This is going to open a formula editor for Zebra BI, and we can just name our formula now. This one we're going to name gross margin percent. And we're going to calculate it, and here Zebra BI is really going to help us because we only need to tell it which of our accounts we want to include in our calculation. So we're going to add our gross profit, and we're going to divide it by our revenue, just like that. And you could see that it was easy for me to find the right accounts because Zebra BI auto-completed all of my searches. We're going to click here on percentage because this is a percentage measure, and we are going to change the color to blue like this to give it a little bit of extra emphasis. Now we can add it to our visualization, and we can see it already on our visual. Our gross margin percent dropped by almost 5 percentage points. And this is very important here. You can see that we told Zebra BI that this is a ratio, and it already automatically formatted it as a percentage, showing the variances even in percentage points, not percentile changes. This is the correct way to present financial ratios, and it's going to save you hours of manual setup or manual formatting. Now the drop of our gross margin versus plan is a little bit over 4 percentage points, implying that we are less efficient in producing our services or materials. Let's add another calculation here for our operating income margin. We're just going to go back to add formula and name it. Again, we're going to find our accounts, operating income divided by revenue. Okay, again, make it a percentage, enhance it or make it a little bit more visible by using some blue, and add it to our visualizations. Our operating income margin now shows a little bit of a better position because of all of the savings that we did with our operating expenses. However, we can see that our company's overall profitability after our operating costs are included still worsened, but less so than our gross margin, showing of course that we had the savings that we can see here in research and development and sales, bringing us to lower operating expenses. Now, since we know that these kind of calculations are very common and can help you clearly communicate the differences that are going on in your data, Zebra BI offers the ability to create a quick column calculation with which you can get to the same results a little bit quicker. If we add this quick calculation here and choose percentage of, it's going to make a new column. In this column, we can go and we can change the calculation type. We still want percentage of, but then here for reference category, we would want our revenue. Okay, and now you can see we have the same calculation, 63.4% or 29.3% respectively for our gross margin and our operating income margin. And this could especially be very useful in a meeting or a presentation where you need this data very quickly and for more than one category. But if you're going with something more permanent, I think the row calculations make more sense. At this time, Q3 earnings are coming in and full year results will soon follow. So at this time, having a view that combines all of this information, I think would really be beneficial. And it's something that we can do pretty well with Zebra BI. So what we can do is we can use the group placeholder that you can see here to show, let's say, months inside of quarters or compare different business units between each other side by side. Or like we want to use it now, for different yearly calculations. We can build this simply by dragging our period calculation to our group's placeholder. There we go. You can now see that we have a month-to-date calculation for our visual right here. And since we've just done this, we don't need the month-to-date, year-to-date slicer that we have here. So we can delete this, and now the groups, of course, become month-to-date and year-to-date because there's nothing filtering one or the other. One more thing that we need to do is we have to add some forecast values because we are also going to do the calculation to full year. Now we're going to go into filters, and the only thing I'm going to do is I'm going to remove the filter here for period calculation, which just tells us that we're not supposed to do full year calculations. And now you can see we have month to date, year to date, and also full year calculations. But there is quite a lot of data here, and we can just hide some columns and get a little bit of a better view of everything. Okay, so what I've done is I've hidden all the forecast columns in our month-to-date and year-to-date calculation, and I of course left the forecast column only for the full year calculation as our year hasn't ended yet. Next thing we can do is we can make this visualizations just a little bit more focused on our variances so we can see the comparison there a little bit more. Let's change our actual columns from calculated waterfalls to just a table view, getting us some numbers. And now we already can see that we can show more data. Leave the absolute variances as they are, but change the relative variances to size dots. This way we are going to be able to showcase the same data but on a smaller canvas. Next, we can go back and change the variance column to a calculation waterfall. There we go. And we also have to change the calculation here for full year, not actual versus plan, but forecast versus plan. There we go. All right. So now we have everything versus plan. And this flexibility to go from one view to the next view from the same data is why finance teams really love their structured models with our visualizations, as you can get things presented clearly and efficiently and always consistent from the same data source. So now that we created this view, I think it's good enough to have its own report page where we can have these different calculations. But I still think that in our financial report, we need a top level view of our financials like we got from the financial statement that we had in the beginning, and we can just move these calculations back to our report slicer like we have here. Now it's time to move to the second part of how to make our reports more actionable. And like we explained before, the numbers alone don't really tell the whole story. The real value comes from explaining why the results are as they are. So for that, we need dynamic comments. We can link these small explanations directly to different data points on different accounts for different periods. And to do this, we can use the table that I showed you in the beginning for our comments. Let me just show it to you again. So this comments table, and the way that we're going to do this, we're going to simply drag and drop our comments measure to our comments placeholder in the Zebra BI visualization, like this. You can see that this already added some comment markers, like we said, to specific accounts, but we just need to switch on the comment box as well. And now you can see that we have these great explanations for, let's say, our service and other revenues, where a key client renewal was postponed to May. To learn in more detail how to create this comments table and the measure that you need for your comments to dynamically link to your Zebra BI visualizations, I am going to link a knowledge base article that we have on our website that takes you through all the steps, and by following them, you're going to be able to build this same working dynamic comments for your reports. Now, as we mentioned, these comments live inside of the model, and so they dynamically switch to whatever slicer or whatever we do to the data, just like the data does, and they live in the data model alongside the data. However, for meetings or ad hoc reviews, you can also use the annotation layer. These allow you to create quick comments or different annotations and place them directly on the visual. Now, these live on the visual itself and are not connected to the ones in the data model. However, they do offer the same interactivity, so in day-to-day use, you would not actually be able to differentiate between one and the other. Let's add one of these comments now. We simply go here to add a comment, and you can see that we can actually even add a comment to our gross margin, so to our calculation that we made ourselves. For this, let's add this comment that margin decline was mainly driven by higher service delivery costs and increased material prices. Lower service revenue amplified this effect, reducing overall profitability despite stable product margins. Good. I think now we have explanations wherever we need them, and just like before, just like I told you, the interactivity is the same. So if I now go, let's say, to March, comments are completely different, even the one that I made, and now going back to April, all of the comments come back. Now these are again perfect for clarifying outliers, preparing slides for management discussion, or adding them straight onto your presentation while you're giving it with more in-depth understanding of what was going on. Now that we have our P&L created, I did promise you the ability to turn this report into a balance sheet or cash flow report. Now we can do this very easily by just creating a slicer from our report type column that we have in our accounts table, if you remember. Now just choosing one or the other, the data simply calculates for the new report. Now this is all done by combining all the information inside of our fact table with the accounts dimension to configure different statements, and in the end using the category class column to embed the calculation logic. To take a better look at how exactly this was built, consider downloading this P&L statement from our website, or you can also find it linked in the description of this video. Now that I think that we've successfully shown our details quite well with our two different views, I think it's time to make some of our trends to show our direction. So let's go to a new page. We would usually start building trends with charts, not tables. Charts are usually not the thing that we think about with financial analysis, but you're going to see that they can help us understand our data even more. Let's build a small multiples view of our KPIs. First of all, let's add a Zebra BI chart. Again, make it a little bit bigger to use as much space as we need. And then we are going to add in our actual data. And for categories, we are going to use our years from our calendar. And we're going to group all of this by our account groups, like this. And we have this beautiful small multiples chart already created. And as you could see, the build was very similar to the one that we've done with our tables visual before, with the different time period calculation types that we included. Now from this point, there are quite a lot of ways that we can go about understanding our data. First of all, we can again put in the plans and get a comparison between years of how our most important KPIs moved, like what was happening with our revenues, what was happening with our gross profit, etc. But there's also another thing that we can do. If we go back to the annotation layer, we can add a CAGR arrow. Now that we have our CAGR arrows calculated, it's going to be very easy to understand what's going on, but we can also use some annotations to give even comments on the CAGR arrows. Let's say if we put one on gross profit saying that the yearly decline since 2023, showing that cost pressure and lower service revenue consistently eroded profitability across this period. There we go, making this a very clear chart with a very clear message. All of the small multiples are scaled perfectly as well, so you can really understand the differences and the dynamics between the different accounts. So one very cool one is that we can see that our COGS are still lower than our gross profit, meaning that we are turning quite a lot of our revenue into profit. And with the addition of comment for deeper understanding and more informed decision, again, on very specific data points, even inside of each of the trend charts, this view really answers all of our trend questions, and with the help of CAGR arrows, we can get an even better understanding of what our long-term movement actually looks like. And this is the kind of analysis your executives would want: clean, comparable, and instantly clear. So now you have it, an automated, standardized, and insightful income statement, balance sheet, and cash flow report built entirely in Power BI. Now remember that you can get Zebra BI directly from the Microsoft App Store and start transforming your reports today. You can also try Zebra BI for free by going to www.zebrabi.com/trial. And if this helped you, like, comment, and subscribe for more Power BI tutorials for finance.